Hello, this is Paula McLain, author of The Paris Wife, a historical novel about the relationship between Ernest Hemingway and his first wife, Hadley Richardson. And I'm going to be reading from a part of the novel that's a rather dramatic moment in their relationship. Chapter 21. Near Thanksgiving 1922, the Toronto Star sent Ernest to cover a peace conference in Lausanne that would decide the territorial dispute between Greece and Turkey, the thing that had started the terrible business at Smyrna and had generally kept them killing each other for the better part of 3 years. When the cable came, I saw Ernest's nervousness. He almost couldn't open it, and I knew why. We couldn't take another fight like the last one. We might not survive it. "Lausanne," he said finally. "We have the money. You'll come too." "I needn't," I said. "I can be good." "No," he said. "I want you there." I was relieved he'd insisted and agreed to go, but by the time the trip was launched, I was sick in bed, my head stuffed and aching. I couldn't eat anything without retching. We decided he would go alone and that I would join him when I could travel. My old friend Letitia Parker from St. Louis happened to be coming through Paris just then, and she said she wanted to visit every day and take care of me when Ernest was gone. It wouldn't be like his time in Turkey at all, or even like Genoa. By the time I felt well enough to join him, it was early December. He packed happily, knowing that when the conference was over and the reporting was done, we'd have a long ski holiday at Chambly and have Christmas there with Chink and then go on to Italy and to Spain. All in all, we wouldn't be back to Paris for 4 months, and I was ready for a nice long break from the cold and the dampness. I hadn't been out of bed for a week, and I wasn't sure I'd have the energy for skiing, but I was damn well going to try. Along with the travel plans passing back and forth between us, Ernest had also cabled to say that Lincoln Steffens, one of the journalists he'd met in Genoa, was in Lausanne and highly impressed with his dispatches. He wanted to see everything Ernest had written so far, but he'd only had one thing with him, My Old Man, a story about a boy and his ruined jockey father. Steffens thought the story was wonderful and compared it to Sherwood Anderson. Ernest didn't like to be compared to anyone, and it seemed worse somehow that it was Anderson, a friend and champion, but it helped that Steffens had offered to send the story on to an editor friend at Cosmopolitan. Ernest had only one published piece at that point, in a small art magazine out of New Orleans called The Double Dealer. There was only that, and the promise from Pound about printing something for Three Mountains Review. This was much more promising, thrilling even. As I packed my big suitcase, I thought about how long we'd be gone and how anxious Ernest would be to return to his stories and to the novel. It went without saying that he'd like to show more of his work to Steffens, and so I headed for the dining room, to the cupboard where Ernest kept all his manuscripts. I gathered everything together and packed it in a small valise. This was my surprise for him, and I felt buoyed by it as I left the apartment for the Gare de Lyon. The station was busy, but I had never seen it any other way. Porters scrambled by in their red jackets, past the waxed wooden benches and the ornamental palms, and the well-dressed travelers headed home or away with anticipation. By morning, I would be with Ernest again, and all would be well, and this was my only thought as I moved through the station and handed a porter my bags. He helped me onto the train, put the big suitcase with my clothes on the rack up high, and placed the small valise under my seat where I could reach it. The train was nearly empty. We had half an hour before departure, so I went to stretch my legs and get a newspaper. I threaded through the station, past the vendors with their apples and cheese and Evian water, the rented blankets and pillows and warm-wrapped sandwiches and little flasks of brandy. When the conductor called for boarding, I hurried onto the train with the stream of passengers and found my compartment just as it was before, except for the small valise. It wasn't under my seat. I didn't see it anywhere. In a panic, I called for the conductor. "Is there something I can do?" my seatmate said while I waited for him to appear. She was a middle-aged American who seemed to be traveling alone. "I can lend you something of mine to wear." "It isn't clothing," I shrieked, and the poor woman turned away, understandably horrified. When the conductor finally arrived, he didn't seem to understand either. I couldn't stop crying long enough to find the right words in my terrible French. Finally, he called over 2 French policemen who led me outside the train and interrogated me while everyone stared. They asked for my identification cards, which one of the officers examined while the other asked me to describe the bag and my actions in detail. It was yours, this valise? My husband's. Is he on board? No, he's in Switzerland. I was bringing it to him. It's his work. 3 years worth of work. And here I lost any remaining composure. I felt sick with rising dread. Why are you standing here, questioning me? My voice pitched shrilly. He's getting away. He's probably long gone by now. Your husband, madame? The thief, you idiot! We cannot help you if you're going to be hysterical, madame. Please. I felt as if I might lose my mind. Please, just search the train. Search the station. What do you estimate is the value of the case and its contents? I don't know, I said in a fog. It's his work. Yes, so you said. We'll do what we can. And the 2 men walked off officiously. The conductor agreed to hold the train for another 10 minutes while the police performed their search. They walked from one end of the train to the other, asking the passengers if they'd seen the bag. I didn't for a moment believe that whoever had taken it was still on the train. It had obviously been a common pickpocket who had seen an opportunity and taken it, hoping for valuables. Instead, it contained every thought and sentence Ernest had sweated over since we came to Paris and well before. The Chicago stories and sketches, every poem and fragment. He never threw anything away, and it was all there. The 2 officers came off the train empty-handed. Nothing yet, madame, one of them said. We'll continue to look, but if you still intend on traveling to Switzerland, I suggest you take your seat. I gave them our address and the phone number for the dance hall downstairs, since there wasn't a phone in our apartment, but I didn't hold out much hope they'd succeed in their efforts. Paris was vast, and too much time had already passed, and I imagined the thief hurrying to an empty alleyway, opening the case, and then shutting it immediately. He'd have dropped it where he stood or pitched it into a rubbish pile. It could be in any alleyway or gutter or burning trash pile in Paris. It could be listing at that moment toward the bottom of the Seine. I'm very sorry for your trouble, my seatmate said, when I'd finally made my way back to the compartment. No, I'm sorry, I said, beginning to weep again. I'm not usually this discomposed. Is it very dear, what you've lost? The train grumbled beneath us, then lurched away from the platform with finality. There was no stopping or changing anything now, no avoiding the truth of what had happened. I felt dread settle in to fill me completely, and a new, hard-won certainty. There was only one answer to her question. Priceless, I said, and turned away. Chapter 22. What followed was the longest night of my life. The mountains closed in as we headed into Switzerland, and blackness fell. I thought about how I would tell Ernest the work was gone, but I couldn't imagine it. There were no words. When we finally pulled into Lausanne the next morning and I saw Ernest on the platform with Steffens right beside him, it was all I could do to stand and walk toward them. I was crying. Ernest looked at Steffens and shrugged as if to say, "Who can understand a woman?" But then I couldn't stop, and Ernest knew something was terribly wrong. Still, it was ages before I could say the words. Steffens excused himself, telling Ernest he'd arrange a meeting. When he was gone, Ernest made me sit down at a cafe near the entrance of the station. All around us, couples and families kissed goodbye or bade each other farewell, and they seemed so painfully untroubled to me. A fresh wave of tears came. "What is it?" Ernest asked again and again, first worried and tender, then angry, then worried again. "Whatever it is, we'll get through it. Nothing can be that bad." But it was. It was exactly that bad. I shook my head and cried harder, and it went on this way until finally I was able to tell him about packing the case and stowing it for the journey. I didn't need to say more. His face grew pale and very serious. "You lost it on the train." "It was stolen out from under me." He nodded, taking it all in, and I watched his eyes carefully, how they changed and steadied, changed and steadied. He was trying to be brave for me, I knew, because he wasn't sure what I would do. "You couldn't have packed everything. Why would I need it all? If you were going to be making changes in the originals, I thought you'd want the copies too, so that everything would be right." "You must have left something," he said. I shook my head and waited. Would he snap from the strain and fly into a rage? I'd certainly earned that. I'd taken what was his, what was most his in the world without his asking me to, as if I had that right, and now it was gone. I have to go back. I need to know it for myself. I am so sorry, Tatey. I shook with remorse and heart sickness. It's going to be all right. I made it. I can make it all again. I knew he was bluffing, if not outright lying, but I held him tight and let him hold me, and we said all the words people say to each other when they know the worst has come. Late that night, he boarded a train back to Paris while I waited in Lausanne in a wet knot. Steffens took me to dinner and tried to calm my nerves, but even with several whiskeys in me, I jangled. He was gone for 2 days and sent no cable. But just as I could see myself reaching into the cupboard over and over, packing everything away in the valise, I could see him coming into the quiet apartment and discovering for himself that it was all really gone. Turning on all the lights, he first looks at everything in plain sight, the table and the bed, the kitchen. He looks at the floor and walks between the 2 rooms slowly, saving the cupboard until he's seen everything else, because that's the last place, and there won't be anywhere to look after, and no hope left at all. He has a drink first, and then another, but finally he has to see it. He puts his hand on the knob and pulls the door open, and then he knows everything. There isn't a page left in the cupboard, not a note or a scrap. He looks and looks, standing there, wrenched out and hollow. As desolate as the cupboard is, that's how he is too, because the pages belong to him and are him. It's like someone has taken a broom to his insides and swept them out until everything's clean and bright and hard and empty.